My name is John Van Etten with Human Synergistics, and I'm very happy to kick off our session today, hearing from a client organization that uses HS tools and can share some best practices on how these tools are utilized, implemented, and introduced in an organization. So today we get to hear from, and I'm very happy to be joined by Ania and Ali of Bayer in their people and culture section of the organization, to share their insights and to discuss the topic of how we live what we preach in organizations. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to join us today and share your input.
Thank you, John. And I think we can just, Ali, directly jump into this. I think that we have some of the stories to share, and we would like to walk you through our journey. So I would go ahead and share my screen. If you give me a heads up if you can see it.
Yes, at least I can.
Yeah.
Great. Then maybe I'm going ahead and start the intro about both Ania and myself. We both are working at Bayer, a company with 100K of employees. So our vision within Bayer is health for all and hunger for none, which is supported by our mission, Science for a Better Life. We both are working in procurement, which consists of around 650 colleagues around the globe, so across different regions, but also countries. And we enable Bayer's vision, at least within procurement, while being a trusted professional and embrace our unique position to orchestrate internal and external networks. There's one more thing what we are doing. It's embedding everything, sustainability in everything we do. And to give you also maybe a tangible example of our living or living out in the direction of our procurement mission is being today here and sharing the knowledge with you, with the hope that it will help you and inspire you, and we can create some kind of positive impact. Is one way of igniting our external networks. So this is how we are trying also to live up to our mission. And on the other side, I'm based in Leverkusen. I'm living near to Düsseldorf with my two kids here. One daughter is 7 years old, one boy who's 11 years old. Both of them think they're already 18. So there are some challenging times going ahead, but it's fine and it's making fun. The network. We are, I think, coming also within procurement out of a huge transformation program within procurement and talking about the future strategy. Our department where we are working in with Ania is called People and Culture. And so this is the department where we are with Ania together. And this is part of our future strategy. So we both raised our hands at that time to change something. And we believe, the best version of ourselves and the most meaningful connections is rooted somehow in having constructive behaviors. And today, I would like to take you on a journey with us, a journey, I would say, full of hope and dreams. And dreams are sometimes far away. It needs time and consistency. My question would be to you maybe also, when was the last time you were dreaming? And just giving you, the 5 seconds of reflection on that. And I would like to share you a bit about our dreams we had and how it started and where we are today. So it's a kind of story I would like to tell. And how I normally doing this is by sharing a story what I am telling to my diary. So it will be a diary entry I would like to bring a bit more closer to you. And I would like to read it out. So, dear diary, do you remember the 4 colleagues who wanted to do it differently? We didn't know exactly what it was and how it could look like, but you probably remember my famous sentence, we will manage. I know you wanted to know how it feels this different. And we did not have an answer to this a year ago. And it's okay to not have an answer to everything and to express this also, like we are doing in some cases. The one thing we know though is, whatever we do, we must live what we preach. In our journey, we didn't know where we stand when it comes to our culture. Why do we wake up every morning? what prevented us from living up to our ideal, and how our day-to-day is connected to our mission and philosophy. What we knew, though, is there's help outside that can help us with diagnosing it. Merci, Marie. Thank you, John. Now we know. This is already the first step in making a difference and living up to what we preach by using the tools on ourselves first. Let's come back to the dream. What if we are creating an environment where everyone can bring his or her best on a table? An environment of living up to our mission, seeing it, feeling it, orchestrating our networks, and sustaining it. What if one colleague in our journey is coming after time and says, "Thank you so much. You changed my life." How does that feel? Dreams need time and consistency. It is like our journey, and it needs time and consistency, and we would not be able to achieve it on our own. In the beginning, it was only a work stream. We did not dream of it becoming our full-time jobs. We also recognized it's not us changing the organization. It is the people. We need the people, and we asked ourselves, how can we do it? We decided that we want to bring people together, helping us, as it is not Ania's and Ali's journey, it's our journey. We were dreaming of having 2 hands full of people going together with us on the journey, multiplying, impacting, influencing. And we all come back to our base camp every quarter to plan the next steps to reach everyone's dream. You want to know if this happened? Being patient is one more thing we have learned during our journey. We understood that we must teach people differently. We have a process behind. It is called educate, discover, discuss, learn, and reflect. We believed in our people. They managed. It just took some time. We waited and learned. We have learned to stop telling people what to do. We asked more and followed our values of giving back. We are givers. We waited and were patient. We have educated them on techniques to grow to constructive patterns and let them discover before telling them. We let people discuss and learn from their own experiences. We asked them, all right, so what? Dear network, we have asked you, how does that feel? And if this happened, right? Let me read you out a quote from a colleague we just recently received. I think it was last week. You have a strong sense of your surroundings. You are specifically gifted in a space of emotional intelligence. You have developed this incredible system of both giving and receiving emotions, a safe space where people to be themselves in their multiplier community. You give your full attention and truly embrace what people are saying. You talk about things others would be afraid to embrace. You have truly started a movement, and people want to be around you and go with you on this journey. At least I have goosebumps. I don't know about you, but this is somehow maybe also giving you a sense of what is the feedback the organization is coming back after, implementing those kind of things. But let's come back a bit to the living what we preach, which is also the headline of today. The question is, what takes us to be more self-aware about doing activities that gives us energy, play into our values, and simply live our superpower? What makes our jobs motivating? And as said, the first step to making it different and living up to what we preach is by using the tools on ourselves first. Today, connecting people, bringing them together, impacting and influencing them. This is at least my thing. How does that feel? It's like the world's mine. One of the greatest learning moments was when a colleague caught me acting in a passive defensive behavior and told this to me in a constructive way. And of course, I was not aware about this because this is the way how the system was and is treating me. What took it to change it? For me, going on a journey with myself till I'm enjoying myself and can help others to enjoy too. Is this already a small action of, many others, maybe in the direction of living what we preach? We believe yes. So asking, not telling, being self-aware about your values and how this is playing out in your professional as well as personal life. Working on your self-esteem, being aware of when you must start, stop, continue. Having clarity about your authority, boundaries, roles, and tasks. Having hope, stability, compassion, trust, and not to forget, dreams, to live what we preach.
Thank you, Ali. And I think that this is already giving you a little bit of a feeling on how we have created the journey and wanted to take people with us. And I hope that you actually recognized what Ali did. He did take you through all of the different quadrants that you see on the picture. At the same time, we wanted to make sure, and maybe also to show you that this is how we work together. It's to have a little bit on the one side, the inspiration, and at the same time, to also go into some more details to explain what is actually behind some of those actions and what did we do. But before I jump into this and before I explain it, I want to share with you also my reflection before I started. So I was really kind of preparing for the session today. And I was thinking in terms of what can we actually share here? What is that we can leave you with? What is really something that can make an impact? And then I recognized that most of the things that we do, you know all of this. I mean, you are the ones who also brought it to us. I mean, the people who will be listening, this is not something that is not out there. It exists. We all have access to this knowledge. And on the one hand, I believe that this is a great thing. It means that there is already so much information that we can apply. Of course, I'm aware that there are still new developments. I mean, topic of culture, leadership is continuously developing, but still there is already so much things that we can just take and implement. But if I were to think what kind of is the one thing that you should really be focusing on is consistency. And I would say it's not the silver bullet, right? It's not something that all of us would like to hear. There is a solution to changing culture. Unfortunately, there isn't. It's about trying things out and being consistent. And even if the things do not work at first, you just stay on the journey, try a new thing, figure out what we can do to make it better. And you in Human Synergistics, you say that your mission is to change the world one organization at a time. And I would say that for us, it's one person at a time, because we continuously ask ourselves, how can we reach our colleagues, what we can do to support them on the journey. And this is also our session today. We will walk you through what do we do, but when we ask what we can do for other people, we always ask ourselves, what do we need to do first? Because if we ask other people to change or develop themselves or grow, we believed from the get-go we cannot do this if we don't try it ourselves. So what does that actually mean in a little bit of more details and the story behind? We do start here with the mission and philosophy topic, but before, you already probably can recognize mission and philosophy, part of our climate factors, so causal factors, already something that we will be touching upon. But before we even knew, and this is not what was supposed to happen. But before we even started and understood the climate factors, the one thing that we wanted to make sure was we bring a common language and vocabulary to our organization. So we really started with having a common understanding what culture is, what is climate, what is engagement, and really bringing it to our organization to have a common vocabulary and understanding on how we can build on this, but also to reach out to the organization and have a conversation on what does that mean for them. And then, of course, we started exchange with the Human Synergistics teams to understand, is there something that can help us to have a deeper look and a better understanding? And we did a diagnostic using both OCI and OEI tools in order to understand where our organization stands. And one reflection I want to also share here is this data is amazing. There is a lot that you can learn from. At the same time, and you know this, there is a lot of complexity in it. It does give you a lot of information. And if I look back, I believe that doing the diagnostic is super important because it gives you a benchmark, it gives you a starting point. And for us, what it helped with was a clear call to action, that we do have things to work on. And it does give you a sense of direction, right? Because we talk about what is our North Star? How do we want to build a constructive culture? For us, and this is what I would always also recommend, using OEI was super helpful because we basically got our roadmap. And you will also see this, is that because of some of the climate factors, we understood that those are the topics that we should tackle first. And maybe those are the topics that are actually hindering our organization from living the constructive culture. And unless we are willing to admit this and able to start to work on this, we will never be able to really live sustainably the constructive behaviors in our organization. So the one of the first things we understood and learned, it's mission and philosophy topic. This is what Ali mentioned in terms of how do we live our mission of Bayer? How do we live the vision of procurement? How do we connect it for ourselves and also for our people in terms of what do we do on a daily basis that is really connecting us to living the purpose of our organization? And we said we always look at it from also our perspective. So how do we live the mission for us within people and culture? Is we needed to understand that for us, living constructive culture, it's actually living their life values. And I think that this was also something for us to have clarity on. We are not introducing something new. Yes, maybe the language is new. Maybe the tools and techniques, the vocabulary is different, but we still are going in the same direction in order to live the life values. And the life values, it's leadership, integrity, flexibility, and efficiency. And it was clear for us that we can really find a connection between the life values and constructive culture. So for us, it was, why do we do this like this? Is to be able to implement this and operationalize a little bit the values that in many organizations are statements on the wall. And for us, it was really the important aspect of making sure, okay, do we understand where we are currently? And diagnostic helped with this. And how can we bring our organization closer to living this on a daily basis? So that's mission and philosophy. And I think there's a lot of storytelling that we introduce, a lot of also some fun stuff along the way. At the same time, with everything that we do, we want to make sure that we also involve our organization. So that's another aspect of employee involvement. And you heard from Ali talking about us wanting to build communities. We have a few people here in our call that actually started the journey with us. So this was also something that it is amazing to see how this topic can be lived and understood by the organization. I think that we have so much to build on, already having the understanding in the organization that sometimes with those programs, we try to do a very top-down approach. And here I have to mention, we are quite lucky to have a super great support of our leadership team. So we actually also have this. We have support of our chief procurement officer, so our boss, but also the leadership team. However, for us, it was important that it doesn't feel like a leadership cascaded down program. It is about making sure that people tell us what they want and that they have the power of creating the environment for themselves. And this is what's happening now. So we do have the different communities that are able to drive the topic themselves, to embed this in the organization. Of course, the downside, and there is a downside of doing it like this, it means that it might feel a little bit chaotic. It might feel that different parts of the organization are going at different speed at time. At the same time, I mentioned consistency and making it sustainable. I do believe that this is the only way that you can do this, because then it's driven from people's internal motivation to drive change and not something that is another checklist activity that we need to do, as an organization. And what does it mean for us in this context is that we also make sure that we ourselves are continuously learning from our organization, but also from outside. I think we started the journey of making sure that we ourselves are also accredited in HS tools, that it's not only, I mean, having also external coaches. This was also very helpful for us to have external support. And also exchanging with other companies, making sure that we also, what I've mentioned in the beginning, listen to podcasts, read books, really continuously educate ourselves and sometimes change our minds. I think that this is also the important aspect of learning, that we are open to change and recognizing if some things do not work. That's okay, that's part of this, and it will need to be flexible enough that we can adapt along the way. Because I mean, we are talking about working with people, and we all know this. It's not so easy to change our own behaviors, even if we are super motivated to do this. How can you do this for other people? It's kind of another level of complexity that we would need to tackle here. So I would say continuous learning is something that we try to live and embed for ourselves as well. And then moving on, it's the leader development aspect. And I would say leader development is something that is part of most culture change. And also from the perspective of climate factors, we don't only talk about the leadership, we really talk about our role as leaders across all of the different elements, because we do take decisions that are connected to this. Ali mentioned this. For us, how we define leaders, it's actually everyone in our organization. We do at the same time distinguish between some of the special roles that people leader have in terms of what is their role in terms of supporting the organization going forward. And here it's similar to what I've said before. We have elements of standardized program. At the same time, a decision that we took very early on is we don't create templates that we cascade down into the organization across everyone, that everyone does the same thing. Because we do believe that people are at different stages. And one of the statements that we use very often is meet people where they are. So if we have a team that is just coming together, new leader, we wouldn't invite them on the journey the same way that we would do with a team or an organization that is there for 2-3 years and they are in a very different stage. And also it all depends on what are some of the actions that individuals also took already. So of course, we do have some standard ways of addressing the organization, bringing content. Ali mentioned the education piece. How do we ensure that this is lived in the organization? At the same time, we really want to make sure that we tailor it to the needs of the teams. One thing that I want to mention is the coach approach, because this is something that we did take a decision that we rolled it out across the organization. So we really invite everyone to take part, on the one hand in the training, but really live this approach. And this is the same thing that I would say for us. How are we living it? It's we actually try, and I really mindfully say try, to ask more than tell, because I'm rather a teller. So for me, this is also a personal journey to make sure that asking more questions and understanding where people are and not necessarily giving them the answers to the questions they never had is also an important learning. So I would say this is part of what we try to make sure it's embedded in our organization, but also for ourselves, even in our exchanges, that we start with a question rather than with an assumption of knowing what people need and where they are. And last but not least, it's the communication aspect. And I have to say that for us with the communication, it was a little bit of a tricky choice, because it's not that this was kind of the lowest scoring element for us. We've seen a lot of good things already happening. The choice behind communication came because all that we do is brought into the organization through communication. So if we don't do this well, it's difficult to do everything else well. So this was one of the reasons why we wanted to make sure that we focus on this, that we bring this to the organization. And for some of the things that we've already where organization appreciated is we are able to kind of build the big picture, to explain the why to the organization. The really missing piece, I think, for many of us was, how does it connect to me? And for this, we use our so what, asking people, okay, so what do you do with this? We can have an amazing conversation for an hour. So what? What is the next step? Is this something that you can use Or is this something that you can think, reflect? Is this something that can be useful for you? And we really challenge ourselves on asking this ourselves, that we don't get lost and disconnected from what's actually happening in the organization, what's actually happening for the individuals in the teams. Do they even have space to have those conversations? And is it something that they can relate to and think that this is something that they can bring for themselves? And it's true for any culture topics, but it's also true for everything that we do within the organization, right? Because I always say that our culture journey, we are not doing it for the sake of culture change. We are doing this because it supports our strategy, it supports the purpose of our organization, and the two cannot live without one another. So this is the part where we really want to make sure that within also communication, there is always the connect. How does it connect to me? How does it connect to the bigger picture of the organization? And how do we live this? I think that this is exactly what I've just mentioned, is we ask, so what? And this is how I would like to close, to actually ask the question to you guys as well. Because, I mean, we now talked, I promised it would be 20 minutes, it's now half an hour. So we talked for half an hour. And the question we would like to leave you with is, so what? Is there anything from what we have just explained that is of benefit, can serve as a reflection or a starting point? And the beauty of me asking this question is I cannot answer it for any of you. It's something that everyone needs to answer for themselves, because the answers will be different. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Fantastic insight and input. I know I have lots of questions. Let me see if anyone in the session taking part today would like to intervene before I jump in with my list. Thank you again. Good. If anyone has one, please feel free to interrupt. I thank you for presenting this. This is a lot of what I find our clients and organizations struggle with, just in terms of identifying a plan and a strategy for introducing these concepts, as well as for implementing change and getting the ball rolling. You know, the things you're talking about in terms of how we connect with our people, create an internal community, communicate what we're doing, include people in this and involve employees in the steps forward, is a lot of times the challenges that we find. You know, when clients use human synergistics tools, they can understand and get what's in there. The challenge oftentimes is not understanding the results or where we are or where we want to go, but the challenge is building the bridge to move from where we are to implement this and kind of create that traction where people feel that within the organization they see and hear that something is changing, that something different is expected. Those pieces. So I love not only the method, but the amount of time and effort and thought that you've put into this. And I think you're probably already noticing the benefits of thinking through carefully how this is best implemented. Sorry, that's a long, but I hope this serves as a best practice for organizations and people in especially leadership roles, but also in OD and HR, to understand a few best practices and how this is best communicated and carried out.
And I can jump in directly also to give a small comment on this. I think that this is also the tricky bit with the diagnostic, that you can get lost in the data and in the details. And I think that this is a little bit of a avoidance mechanism, can be, in terms of starting to do something. So I think that we even had those exchanges with you, John, directly after we have received your, just start doing things. I think this is one of the things that, if I had a learning, this would be it. It's about starting to get into the mode of doing it, of course, with a plan, of course, with a direction, but also involve the organization along the way. And then in terms of building the community, I think, because here we have Ali, who is super skilled at this. So I would also say that it's about finding people who have this natural capability, and the joy of doing this is super important. and then also making sure that there is something for the people, right? So that it's not that we
Right.
additional burden on the organization, but that there is a direct benefit of doing this. And the last thing I want to mention, that we had Ali those discussions before as well, is, and there is even a statement, right, that we kind of can overestimate what we are able to achieve within a day or week, but we underestimate what we can achieve in a year. And this is something that is super visible with building the community, because sometimes we think that spending the time on first building the relationship, it's a lost time. We already want to jump into the action. We want to do something. And I think for us, this was, Ali, you mentioned patience. Just give it time. It will come that people will also proactively share this. But for us, I have to say, it was months. It was being patient, kind of meeting people where they are, allowing them to experience this. And only after some time, they really came back to us, what can I do more? How can I embed this in the organization? But it took time. On the other hand, I always say, if we didn't do this like this, we would still, the 9 months would pass, and we would still not have the people reaching out and doing something proactively. So it's always this funny perception of, if you don't do this and you don't spend the time, the outcome will be the same.
It's a very important point. It's something that comes up quite often. In fact, our office in Australia just did a podcast on creating these kinds of internal networks, culture change champions, whatever you want to call them, with a lot of best practices. But it is critically important, because culture change requires that the people are getting the message, and that they're taking part in it themselves, and that we can explain why this is important, not only to leadership teams and organizational development departments, but we can understand explain why this is important, sort of to members, regardless of what part of the business that they're in, so that we can all align and really implement and embed that change. One of the questions I had is how do we do that in a way that doesn't feel like additional work? I mean, I realize we're reaching out, of course, looking for people who are enthusiastic, who are excited about change, are interested in implementing these things. But at the same time, this is usually nobody's core role to be a culture change advocate or champion. So any advice that you have on how to encourage those people and encourage them to take part without it becoming a burden?
Yeah, maybe I can answer to this. And we have actual people in the call doing it, so maybe they can just build on what I'm saying here. I think the original intention, what we had in the beginning, was really not that we are now doing this because we need people who is helping us doing it. We want just to give back something to the organization, even it's on a professional, but also on a personal basis, that they can have is it a reflection? Is it something they are learning, which is growing their own, constructive behaviors, being more self-aware, having more self-actualizing, self-esteem, self-love, or whatever it is, depending on also the other constructive behaviors. But the thing what we said in the beginning was that, culture or behavior or acting in this way of how we would like that, it's not a thing on top. It should be somewhat integrated in our everyday actions we are doing.
Right. Exactly.
And through all the, I think, small multiplier community calls we had, and those topics where I just mentioned, where we are talking about, what is that when we talk about achievement, how you can do this. One technique is, for example, building habits. So how we are building habits, let's educate ourselves about this, and let's see how we can use this in our day-to-day activities, that it's not feeling it's on top. So how you're connecting this with your day-to-day activities, one thing I would say, going in that direction, and how you can really use it. So when we are trying to find techniques which should grow constructive behaviors, we always, or at least, we're trying to combine this, how this can help the people on their day-to-day, and then they can find the connection in that. So I think this is, that it's not feeling on top, because you're already executing and behaving in some way.
Exactly.
And
that's
so just to build on how do you also create a community? The one recommendation, and also learning from us, it shouldn't be a top-down nomination. This is also one of the learnings, that because normally, in organizations, in big corporates, you normally have those kind of processes that would enable this. with this, it was important that we keep it open, that everyone can join if they are willing to do this. That was the first thing. And then within this group of people who proactively started to do something, we were able to see who are the people who can really drive the journey forwards, who can really be also supporting us. And I have to say that for them, it was a no-brainer. So they never asked the question in terms of how can I combine this with my daily work, because they wanted to do this. There is then the motivation to do this. You don't tell them to do it. And this is for me super important in terms of comparing this if you just nominate people.
Right.
Then you kind of, and sometimes you might be lucky, you nominate the right people, but I mean, sometimes we nominate people based on, for example, their performance on the job. And that's great, right? I mean, great that they're high performance, but are they really the same people that would drive the culture change within the organization? Sometimes yes, sometimes not.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's also, how passionate are they about the topic? How well connected are they with other members? The influence that they have on teams. The other point I would say about, doing this differently, meaning rather than delegating and identifying people as we typically would in the past, and rather, reaching out and asking for people to take part. I mean, not only is that, well, kind of a better approach for getting people included and feeling like they're really being heard and listened to, but it's also a shift from the way in which you've been implementing projects in the past, and it's something I talk to clients oftentimes about when we talk about implementing culture shifts and development, is that this needs to sort of look, smell, and sound different than anything we've done before, because if we expect people to do things differently, and that's the message we're sending, then we need to do this project differently, and identifying and delegating those people from the top. If that's the way we've done it before, here's our first chance to, in a way, start doing things differently and send a different message. I also really like your point about this is not on top of the work that we're already doing, but rather it's looking at the work that we're doing and shifting the approach that we take in terms of how we interact with others and get things done. So rather than adding another piece of work in terms of being a culture champion and what it may be, it's rather just a shift in how I do what I do, and also hopefully a more effective way of working for benefiting the people. So again, not on top, but sort of a realignment in a way. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Very good. I hate to hit you with lots of questions, but I did have one more that it comes up very, very frequently. And you mentioned before that, the data and the input and the content that you receive from human synergistics in terms of things like OCI and OEI reports is a lot of information. And I like to say it's a lot of very good information, but one of the challenges that we have, again, in sort of bridging this and creating a journey is how much of that do we need to understand within the organization, and who needs to understand what. Appreciate that you guys have gone through accreditation so that you understand the the tools and the reports in detail, but that's not possible to do in across the entire organization. So who do we inform, and to what extent, and do you have any best practices, a way to introduce these concepts, models, to help people have enough context to understand kind of where we are, where we're going, and why we're doing what we're doing?
Ali, I can start and you build on. I think that first of all, I would say what Ali mentioned already, it's patience. Don't think that if you present circumflex first, it suddenly is clear and understood for everyone. And in terms of the report, I think for us, it was also a journey of exploration in terms of what is the level of information we share with whom, because it was also for us the first time. So we also needed to find our way around this. And now if I reflect back, also one of the things that I would still repeat is to have a level of transparency, meaning you can share some of the information, and some people need this. There are different types of people. For some people, the level of detail in terms of understanding what is really the circumplex picture for the organization, what is the status on the climate factors, what is the status on the outcome, high level, but still you give people this data. This was for me important, that we don't hide this from the organization, because they spend time, and realistically, it's a lot of time to fill in those surveys. If we don't give them something tangible as a result, we are hiding something. So there is an element of sharing the information, which I believe is important from transparency perspective. And now, how does it kind of connect to kind of what do you need to know, what do you need to understand? We do believe that with our leadership team, they need to understand this, because we also treat them as the people, and it's the same, I would say, also for our change makers community multipliers, because we use them also that, use them sounds kind of bad, but kind of, thanks to them, we are able
leverage.
Exactly, introduce this to the organization, right? So it's kind of, they are also the ones, if other people have questions, that they can explain this. So I would say, this is really something that for us was important. At the same time, we defined for ourselves what is really the basic level of knowledge we would like to have for the entire organization. And for us, it's high level understanding of the circumplex. That's it, kind of nothing else. And why? Because we do believe that there is an element of awareness that comes with this. If you describe certain behaviors in a similar language, this helps you. The follow-up is, and we did the analysis May last year. Are we already at this stage? No. So I want to also be transparent in terms of, do we have now the entire organization understanding the circumplex and using the language? No. And I don't think we'll ever have this, right? I think that there is an element of kind of accepting that for some people, this is not at the top of their interest, but they will get this knowledge because other people around them will use the language and will start to implement this. And then the last part of my comment is, we also set for ourselves a number. We said we want to have 33% of our organization as active multipliers, as active in terms of understanding the topic and bringing it to the organization. And we set this number for ourselves across the hierarchies. So we said, it doesn't matter. It's not that we start with the leadership team. We kind of have a broad approach, and we catch people who really believe this is the right thing to do. And then we hope that this is the number that will kind of tip the balance, that they will be the ambassadors that will bring this to the organization. Ali.
No, I agree to everything what you said. I think people have to think about what are the groups who need this kind of data thing, what are the other groups who need maybe something else, what helped our organization was helping and understanding also the models, having very practical examples in usage with the circumplex. One simple thing could be something around what is the experience, one maybe positive or not so positive experience you have made in your working life, and then just write it down and share it with the group. And later on, if you may, explain maybe just the colors of the circumplex and let the people map where these are belonging to. And obviously, you know, the positive ones will move to constructive, and all the not so positive probably between passive, aggressive. Then this is the explanation why we are in that journey and why we are doing it, because all of them would like to experience positive examples, and the not positives probably you will just leave out in your career. So connecting it, very tangible examples, how their day-to-day experience also is matching to the model, I think is one way to really bring this in a different way back to the to your colleagues.
Yeah, it's that moving away from the telling approach and moving into something where we're including people, asking for their input, and then they can see where that falls in these models. You know, it's really not about living human synergistic constructive cultures. It's about you living your culture, you developing and growing business in the direction that you would like. I think these tools help to give that external perspective, a framework, and a bit of a language so that we can start to, you know, get our hands on and make tangible what is culture, where are we now, what should be taking place, where are the differences, so that we can align our efforts in a more positive direction to lead us all forward. So that bridge is always something I'm interested to ask about.
Just one last comment. I think that this is also, you know, the problem with this colorful graphs is that we know them from also other tools, which then brings a little bit of a different kind of challenge that we need to differentiate. And it's a level of complexity that I have to say, okay, this is kind of, we need to be clear on what the model is, why is it helpful, because it's kind of, you know, disk model, whatever, insights, all of them using colors, it's kind of, it can sometimes be confusing. So I think that this was also one of the challenge in terms of bringing Circumplex in, but at the same time, in the teams that I've seen this being used and understood that this is behaviors, you can change it, you can work on it. There is a huge benefit. So while again, it's also my personal journey. In the very beginning, I was very conscious of not trying to overwhelm the organization. And I mean, the language in the Circumplex, it's not the easiest language. Some of those statements, it's difficult to remember. So I was really on the fence. Do we really want to overload the organization with this? At the same time, now I've seen some teams when it becomes part of their vocabulary, it's also easier for them to recognize those behaviors in the moment when it happens, or just immediately after. And this is one of the first things that you should be doing if you want to change it. So it's kind of the effort to bring this in the organization in terms of education, making sure that people understand it, it's there. And again, it's not that we have to have really 100% of the people, but I do see the benefit in the teams that really, and also for us, right? I mean, for us, when we started kind of our own development, this is also helpful because you are starting to explain this in a very different way.
Very nice, thank you. Thank you. I had one other question I just have to ask about because of your use of not only OCI to look at, you know, current culture versus ideal, but also looking at organizational climate with OEI. So, you know, if we think about the how culture works model or the iceberg model, or however we want to think about how culture plays out in organizations, you know, when we talk about what we would describe as outcomes, things like employee satisfaction, retention, level of stress, engagement, those sorts of outcomes, those are driven by organizational culture. The next step in that iceberg, if we dig down further, we get to a level that's described as organizational climate. So rather than looking at psychological and behavioral patterns that we're seeing in culture, we're now digging down to really the structures and systems and practices within the organization, and by the way, including leadership, that shape and influence that culture and thereby our ability to perform and be engaged and so on. One of the challenges I've experienced in the past with organizations trying to create this development is it seems tempting to continue to focus on the culture piece. And what I mean is, while that's very important, we fall into a trap of trying to tell our people what to do differently and how to do things differently, without necessarily being willing to step further back in the organization and reflect upon how the systems and processes and leadership that's going on currently might need to change in order to facilitate that. So it's just too often that I find organizations that would love to develop their culture to achieve better results, and they'd love for their people to be more, you know, goal oriented and collaborative and curious in their thinking and adaptive in their approach, but they're not willing to necessarily reward different things or design jobs differently or change the way we distribute autonomy or communicate why we're doing this. And that, of course, is a huge undermining factor and leads the organization to sort of fall into the trap of telling people to do things differently. And when they don't, or they don't see that change, then it's the members' fault that change hasn't happened, when really there needs to be some changes in reflection on the systems playing out in the business. Any input on that kind of challenge?
Yeah, I can share my view at least, and then Ania, you can build on that. For me personally, it does not make sense making, you know, or leaving out the OEI, because the first question we have asked in the very beginning was, what is really the underlying issue, what is preventing us living our ideal culture we are looking up for, right? So in our case, the Life 2.0. Well, what is the thing in between? What is really preventing this? And this is something where a lot of, I think, organizations struggle. They have their employee engagement surveys, doing a lot of activities going in the right direction. Maybe some of them are the ones what is changing really something, but after a specific time, for me personally, it will bounce back because you didn't change the system in between. And very easy example to understand that for me is like, if you have, you know, from the climate practice or the causal factors, how you reward people in the organization. And if you have someone, just imagine you're in a company where always the loudest in the group is reward because, you know, he's starting to challenge people, the status quo, but he's not challenging for the sake of achievement. He's challenging for the sake of just competing or being loud, you know, and
personal recognition
in big projects. And if you're seen, have that visibility and you are promoted. And if this is the system, the reward program internally, which is one of the causal factors, and then probably another employee is looking at that saying, he got the next grade because he was loud and was in these big projects. So probably this is the way I have to behave to get to my next level. So was consequently is doing, you're starting to behave in the same way, but to analyzing what is it really in between, what is preventing that you can move to a constructive one or constructive behavior. This is exactly what the OEI for me is showing.
Yeah.
And I mean, we had this, it's like, for me, I wouldn't do OCI without OEI. I think it's just half of the picture. I do believe that you have to work on both at the same time. You need to start to explain what are the behaviors, kind of, but then you need to make sure that the climate factors are addressed because they will reinforce what you do in the behavior part. Otherwise, if you only do climate factors, of course, yes, but still you need to give the direction, right? In terms of what are the different elements that you're doing. So we always said it's kind of two pieces that we want to work on. Somehow I do believe that it's, we fall into going for behaviors. I don't know why, but I think that this is something that it's either also easier to talk about. And also we believe we probably have more control over it, which I'm still not saying it's easy to change, right? That's a little bit of a different story. With climate factors, I think that this is a little bit, you really need to change something in order to change something. And this is kind of the tricky piece, because we are also touching some of the things in terms of how jobs are designed, kind of, do we need to rethink our mission? How do we live the mission? It's really touching some of the also core elements of people's jobs. And again, it's connected to the fact that you don't do culture separate to everything, because the behavioral work you could kind of do separately. We could have our team just doing nice things for the organization. The climate factors you need to connect across everything.
Right.
So this can also be one of the challenges behind this. And again, I would say for us, we are lucky to have the support of the leadership team that we really continuously also address this. But here I really see this kind of long journey, because it takes time. I mean, in the size of the organization like ours, if you think about the different people you need to involve in actually some of the decisions, if you really touch some of the core topics like job design, and we haven't done that so far, I mean, this is a process that will take years in order to address this.
I think it also gets back to not only successful culture change, but the topic that you brought up of sustainability. So when I talk sometimes to clients about how they use OCI data versus OEI climate type information, I agree we need to do both of them, but there's a slightly different purpose for each, right? So the culture information and the styles and behaviors that we want to see are the things that I think are best used for a lot of the communication and inclusion. These are the behaviors we want to see. Here's why we want to see them. Here's how they're reflected in the values of this business. Here's how you can incorporate them. Again, communicating with your people about what we want to see, why we want to see that, why it's important, and so on. The climate data is much less effective, in my opinion, for communicating, because it's not necessarily something that everyone can change about their job, or right, how my job is designed or what I'm recognized or rewarded for. But we need to understand that so that the organization and its leadership can make changes to those climate factors to literally facilitate and enable people to behave in the ways that we want taking place, consistent with values and positively influencing performance. So it's one of those things that needs to sort of happen at the same time. And but I do think we can communicate about climate, because then we can communicate why we're making these changes, right? So we're changing the way whatever jobs are designed or rewards are carried out or communication is done. And we're doing that because we would like to see more of these kinds of things from you. And here's why that's important to the business, and how you can role model that, encourage that, and so on moving forward. It shows that the organization is not only genuine in wanting and enabling and encouraging this, but that's the sort of thing that really makes this sustainable, right? To your point, we can tell our teams to behave constructively, and we can do that in little parts and pockets of the business. But if it's not systemically encouraged and enabled and facilitated by the organization and its leadership, it's ultimately the sustainability of that kind of development is the risk.
Agree. Nothing to add.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Well, I think we're closing in on our time. I hate to monopolize any more of it. If there are any questions from any of the other participants in the session, please, this would be a good time to chime in. Wonderful. Thank you again so much for the time, the input. It's been fascinating and wonderful to collaborate with you over this time. Looking forward to the journey ahead. Thank you not only for taking your people with you, but contributing to this sort of thing so that we can broaden the positive impacts and learnings. So I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. Thank you, Jessica and Alisa, for joining us. So we had also our familiar faces here. Thank you, Ali, as always. And thank you for the entire team here as well.
Love that.
Thank
you so much. Very nice.